we inform.
Religious freedom is about people of faith being able to live out their faith, live out their convictions, no matter where they are.
We equip.
Sacred honor is the courage to speak truth, to live out your free speech.
We also rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome to The Core here on American Family Radio. Glad to have you with us on today's edition of the program. Walker Wildmon here. Rick Green and myself, we're your host each week on the program At the Core here on American Family Radio. We do try our best to get to the core of what's going on in our culture, in our society, in our government, and ultimately in the world, and we do so through a biblical lens. We view everything under the authority and the infallible Word of God. And so that's how we view the world, and that's how we view everything in it. And that's the goal of the program, is to bring you news and analysis and commentary from a biblical vantage point through the lens of God's holy Word. The events that I want to highlight before we get into some of the news and some of the topics we're going to talk about on today's program, I want to make sure to remind you of the AFA at the Ark coming up in the fall of 2026. The AFA at the Ark is going on towards the end of October. The specific dates are October 29th and 30th. For AFA at the Ark, we're going to be spending an entire day at the Ark Encounter and an entire day at the Creation Museum. So we would love to have you join us at our AFA at the Ark annual trip to the Cincinnati, Ohio area. And we'll be spending some time with friends and fellowship and learning, and obviously visiting these two great locations that are brought to you by Answers in Genesis. So go over to afa.net/events to check out all the information. We're over half full for AFA at the Ark, so this is going to fill up probably within the next, I would say, month or so. It'll be full for this October trip to the Ark Encounter and the Creation Museum. So go to afa.net/events to check out all the information regarding that. Also, all of our spiritual heritage tours are full for the fall, except for the Boston trip. Our Boston trip in late September, the 21st through the 26th, which is our latest addition to our spiritual heritage tours. We're going to Boston for the second time. We went last year. We're going this year. We're going to be touring the Freedom Trail. We're going to be going over to Plymouth Rock. We're going to be going to Lexington, Concord, all of these areas around the Boston area that have to do with America's history, and specifically America's providential history, and how God oversaw and allowed and really blessed the founding of this nation. We'll have Stephen McDowell with us and Tim Barton. Both of those historians will be with us on our trip to Boston coming up in late September. So that's the only trip left for this year, is our trip to Boston, September 21st through the 26th. You can go to tours.afa.net to check that out. Jumping into some of the things that I want to make sure we get to on today's program, the Democrats have made their opinions of the American people and conservative and Republican voters very pronounced, very known. They despise us. They despise the conservative movement. They despise Christians. They were known under the Obama era to boo God at their national convention. And so this is the Democrat Party, and they targeted conservatives and Christians throughout the Biden administration. And so with all of this backdrop, with all of this recent history on how the Democrat Party really loathes the Christian conservative voting base, it's no surprise that they want power again so that they can implement their Marxist left-wing agenda. And as I've said before, I believe that if the Democrat Party is allowed to take the reins of power again, whether it be in the White House or Congress, especially the White House, they're gonna do everything that they can, and they're to target us, and they're going to even do it even more aggressively than they did under President Biden. I firmly believe that, and the reason I believe that is because of the trend that they've shown. Look, the Democrats have shown they get more and more extreme as the years go by. There's nobody within the party that has the ability or the authority or the influence to rein them in and make them a more a less radical, less extreme, less anti-American party. There's just the Obama types are gone. And President Obama is enjoying retirement. He's golfing. He's in Hawaii. He's at Martha's Vineyard. The last thing he's concerned about is making the Democrat Party relevant again. And so the party has effectively been handed over to the AOCs of the world, the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And we'll play some clips of Vice President Harris and Ayanna Pressley. And these are the leaders of the Democrat Party. And so when you have leaders like this, then getting the Democrat Party to something, quote unquote, moderate or presentable to the American people is going to be very difficult. It's going to be very challenging. And anyone who tries to rein them in, like Senator Fetterman from Pennsylvania, well, they denounce him, they shout him down, they disown him. Because he's not towing the radical party line of anti-Semitism, of anti-America hate, and of anti-Christian bigotry. That pretty much is the standard within the Democrat Party now in 2026. Well, to kick this off and tell you that, look, the Democrats, they're not playing games. They're playing for keeps. They're playing to win, and they're playing to ensure that when they do get power, they don't allow Republicans or conservatives anywhere near the White House or the Congress again. This is Vice President Harris recently, the former vice president, talking about how there's really no bad idea within the Democrat Party, and that they should do anything and everything within their power and their control should they get the White House again, to have permanent power in Washington, D.C. This is going to be clip 2.
Say, look, this is a moment where there are no bad ideas. A no bad idea brainstorm is what I'd like to call it. And in that no bad ideas brainstorm, we talk about what we need to do and think about doing around the Electoral College. We talk about the idea of Supreme Court reform, which includes expanding the Supreme Court. We invite a conversation about multi-members districts. We talk about, look, that if we win the Senate, which we should and we will, then the Senate Judiciary Committee should have rules that they put in place so when these people come before as nominees to the Supreme Court and lie, that they are held to account and consequence. Not just that somebody goes on cable news and says they lied, but that there are rules in place to actually penalize people for lying to a Senate Judiciary Committee. That we agree that it is right to have ethics rules for Supreme Court justices. And let's put those in place. Let's talk about statehood for Puerto Rico and D.C. These are the things I think that we've got to do. We've got to neutralize these red states from cheating, including blue states expanding their maps. And all of this, I think, is look, we got to fight fire with fire. These folks are playing to win. We got to play to win.
Well, there you have it. Folks, this is the closest thing to a leader in the Democrat Party that we have here. And I know I'm using that term loosely, calling Vice President Harris a leader within the Democrat Party because she couldn't get the votes to win in the general election, which means ultimately that means the American people, at least the majority, don't view her as a leader. Nonetheless, she's the closest thing we have to a leader. President Biden has gone to the wayside, isn't really making public statements much anymore. President Obama, where is he? Where is he? This is so interesting, and it really shows that President Obama is just in it for himself. And what I mean by that is President Obama can't genuinely care about the Democrat Party and genuinely care about the Democrat Party winning in the future if he's going to allow the likes of Vice President Harris and the likes of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to be the quote-unquote leaders of the future. Unless he agrees with them, unless he consents to them inserting themselves into this somewhat leadership role. But the Democrat Party, look, they've been void of a leader since Obama. I mean, that's a fact. Even when President Biden was in the White House, I mean, he wasn't really the leader of the party. He was just unable to exert that level of influence. So for all practical purposes, just from a political vantage point, President Obama was the last leader of the party. And he's gone now. He's MIA. Nobody knows where President Obama is. Every once in a while, he'll throw himself in every 6 months and make some statement or post something on X. But he's just not out there shaping the conversation, moving the ball down the field for the Democrats. So that leaves them without a leader. And this is very bizarre that the party really hasn't coalesced around a leader. We've got different factions. You've got Gavin Newsom over in California. You've got Vice President Harris, the former VP. You've got the squad, if you will, the AOCs, the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Ayanna Presleys, others. And so then you've got Senator Fetterman over here on an island by himself. And so the Democrat Party is still splintered. They can't even coalesce around opposition against President Trump. They're very much splintered. And I'm not sure how you win national elections that way. It just seems as though somebody in the party is going to have to rise to the top to lead them to win a national election. And speaking of the squad, Ayanna Pressley, Congresswoman, was speaking recently. And all the Democrats know is persistent victimhood, persistent gaslighting, demonization of America. And here Congressman Pressley is telling the American people that, hey, look, the Republicans are still racist. They're still, they're now the party of Jim Crow. We haven't moved on from any of this. They're going after black people. This is what Ayanna Pressley had to say, the Congresswoman. Let's listen to this gaslighting.
This is a unique burden for black America, who for decades, even after the Voting Rights Act was passed, even after the Civil Rights Act was passed, have been outworking and outvoting voter suppression. But it is very clear that this administration is working actively to take us back, not even just to Jim Crow, I would say even pre-Reconstruction, to take us all the way back, seeking to silence and disenfranchise the voices and the votes, and to try to dilute the power and the black representation of black America. So he has been attacking black people, black bodies, black votes, black power, black progress.
Only can minorities talk like this. I mean, this is only can ethnic minorities talk in this manner and use these buzzwords. If I were to use these words, I'm talking about front page of the SPLC latest, email. I mean, I'd never get away with this stuff, and I shouldn't. But she used the word black power. What does that even mean? Are we talking like black power? Are we talking about like Black Panther group? What are we talking about here? And so black bodies? What is that? Black bodies? Oh, goodness. This is the Democrat Party. This is Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley from Massachusetts, 7th Congressional District. Oh, man. Well, and apparently we haven't moved on from the Civil Rights Act and segregation and Jim Crow. We just haven't. Reconstruction. We haven't moved on, America. We are still living in the past. Wow. I don't think the American people agree with that. I think actually when you poll minorities, they would roundly rebuke that narrative that America hasn't progressed and moved on from that era of our history. We'll be back.
If we lose this cultural war, we're going to have a hedonistic, humanistic society.
Discover the story of the culture warrior Don Wildmon and how he went head-to-head with Hollywood, Playboy, the homosexual agenda, and the Disney empire. The movement Don started continues today as AFA fights the attack against truth and righteousness. Watch Culture Warrior and join the fight. Visit culturewarrior.movie.
At the Core podcasts are available at afr.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to this segment, the second segment of today's program here on American Family Radio. At the Core, I'm Walker Wildman. Glad to be with you. As a brief reminder, we have the AFR app out there on all your smartphone, on your tablet device, all the major app stores. Just type in AFR or American Family Radio, and you can download the AFR app for free and listen to live radio programs and past episodes through the podcast feature there on the AFR app. Hey, we're going to be going in 2027, we're going to be going to Greece and Italy. So my brother Wesley and I, we're going to be leading a trip covering the footsteps of Paul in Greece. And then my parents, Tim and Allison, they're going to be going to Italy, looking at some of the sites of the early church and how the gospel spread through that region, through Italy. Also looking at some historical sites there, some historical sites dating back hundreds or thousands of years. And so there's just a lot to see there in both Greece and Italy, and so we'll hope you will join us. Those are trips. The dates are back-to-back, so if you want to do both, you can. You can go over to tours.afa.net, tours.afa.net to check out more information about that. Well, going into the break, last segment, I played this clip of Representative Presley that is claiming that we're going back to Jim Crow, we're going back to pre-Reconstruction, and even equating where we are to the days of slavery. And so the question is why? Obviously, what she's talking about is just utter nonsense. There's no factual accuracies going on here with these talking points that the Democrat Party continually puts forth, that America hasn't progressed, we haven't made movements or momentum on the civil rights front, we're just stuck in the past and unable to move forward, and woe is America, we're just a bunch of racist people, and shame, shame, shame is basically the narrative that you get from the Democrat Party when they talk about America and they talk about the Republican Party. Let's not forget, the Democrats are the party of Jim Crow. The Democrat Party has deep roots to Jim Crow, to segregation, and to racism. All right? And so it's their party that is the party of Jim Crow, segregation, and racism. All right? That's a historical fact. Okay? Secondly, the reason the Democrats can't move on from this constant victimhood and what they've turned into, reverse racism is what this has turned into. They've taken historical facts of the past and they want to relive the past 50, 70, 100 years ago plus. They want to relive the past and they want to create it in the present and use it as a tool against conservatives and Republicans. This is what they do. It is persistent victimhood, all for the sake of power. This isn't about any righteous movement. This isn't about morality. This isn't about justice or any of these buzzwords that they use. This is purely a power play, all right? It is to create class warfare, and in this instance, ethnic warfare. The Democrats, this is all they know over the last, let's say, 20 years to 30 years, but more recently, I would say 15 to 20. This goes back to the President Obama days. But this narrative to scrape the scabs of America, to remind people of the woes of our past, but then act as if we haven't moved on. This is where the Democrat Party thrives. And they constantly put people that ought not be on defense. And they use words like racist, bigot, hater, homophobe, Islamophobe. They throw all these insults, all these buzzwords at people, at their political and ideological opponents, so that we can never truly talk about the real issues here. And if we want to talk, and I'm not even going to go as far to flip this and accuse the Democrats of actually being the racist ones, although there's a strong case for that, because what has become known as reverse racism is a true problem in America. And that is where the white man is targeted simply because of his skin color. And there's actually evidence at America's universities and in corporate America where this DEI Marxist theology that it is has caused reversed racism. And the Department of Justice has actually investigated this and found evidence of it, all right? But I'm not even going to spend a whole lot of time on that because I don't like propping up this victimhood mentality. I don't think it's healthy. I don't think it's biblical. But let's talk about how minorities and blacks have actually been victims of the Democrat Party, which is not what you're going to hear very often. All right, inner city America, urban America, has utterly struggled economically and educationally for a long, long time. Societally, pretty much in all major categories of human flourishing, inner city minorities have struggled very seriously. Go to Detroit, go to Los Angeles, go to New York City, go to Chicago, and these inner city populations have struggled severely. Their towns have been gutted, their jobs have been gutted, crime is rampant, the education system is in crumbles, infrastructure falling apart. And the Democrats that have run these cities and towns for decades, sometimes 50 to 70 years or longer, they have single-handedly ushered in the downfall of inner city America, which largely affects minorities. Not exclusively, but largely affects minorities, just speaking statistically about who lives in inner city America. They have ushered in the downfall of inner city America, the Democrats have, and they have yet to take responsibility for it. And this is the arrogance and the audacity that the Democrat Party holds today, is that they have single-handedly ushered in the fall of inner city America in virtually every category, crime, education, economics, etc., marriage and family, abortion. All of these areas are an utter disaster for inner city America, and it has been brought to you single-handedly by the Democrat Party. You look at all the major metropolitan areas in America, all the major cities in America, there are very few, if any, that are actually run by Republicans. I think I've done these studies. I've looked at, I think Jacksonville, Florida is an extreme outlier. I think they've had Republican mayor there at some point over the last 10 to 20 years. But the rest, Detroit, Chicago, New York City, have been dominated. New York City hasn't had a Republican mayor since Giuliani. All right? These cities have been dominated and have been run by Democrats for decades. And they're in shambles. And so the Democrat Party, the point I'm proving here is that the Democrat Party has zero credibility to lecture the American people on leadership, morality, and economics. In virtually every other public policy category, the Democrat Party has absolutely no credibility to lecture us, to lecture the Republicans on leadership, on justice, on morality, on education, on healthcare, on anything. That's at the local level. And that what I'm talking about, the gutting of America's inner city, has taken place at the local level across the board, America's major cities, pretty much single-handedly by the Democrat Party. They've brought you that, all right? And so I don't want to see any finger pointing at, oh, the Republicans this, the Republicans that. No. Democrats have failed the American people, and they've failed inner city. Now let's go to Washington, D.C. Let's talk national politics, because when you talk about trade, you talk about jobs, some of this has to do with Washington, D.C. politics. Well, let's talk about Bill Clinton. Let's talk about President Obama and Biden. And Republicans nationally have some responsibility here as well. And I'm talking about the exporting of America's manufacturing base, the exporting of America's jobs to China, to Mexico, etc. All right, that has been brought to you in part by the Democrat Party in Washington, D.C. Now, of course, you can look at President Bush and some others, and you can fairly blame them for some of these job exports. But nonetheless, my point here is that the Democrats, they can't exonerate themselves pretty much at all here. The Democrat Party can't take credit for anything good, and they're pretty much responsible in some way for all of the bad in American politics and the American economy and all these major categories that affect the American people, that affect American families. Democrats have been right in the middle of the downfall of America. And that's just talking inner city, that's talking crime, that's talking education, that's really talking these nonpartisan topics are categories where you measure the success of a society, of a culture, of a community. But let's talk about two other areas that are even more indicting, if you will, for the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party has failed voters, and Democrat voters at that, and inner city families when it comes to the topic of marriage and family. Whether it be the divorce rate, the welfare programs incentivizing divorce and the lack of marriage, out of wedlock births, how the whole welfare program brought to you by, in part, the Democrat Party has fostered in this environment where fatherhood is discouraged and single motherhood is encouraged per the programs. If you're married, nope, you don't qualify. But lastly, the ushering in of abortion on demand, brought to you by the Democrat Party. Abortion on demand has led to millions of black babies and minority babies being slaughtered in the womb in the name of abortion and in the name of, quote, reproductive rights. It's a travesty, and that's the largest travesty of them all. Out of the long laundry list of utter embarrassments and failures that are brought to you by the Democrat Party at large, abortion is the biggest stain. Abortion is the greatest evil. How many babies in these major inner cities have been taken from the community, have been taken from their families, and taken from this country because of abortion? And the answer is millions, tens of millions. And we wonder why we have a demographic problem. Oh, I just don't know. I mean, why aren't people having babies? Well, they are having babies. They're just killing them. To the tune of 50 plus million since Roe versus Wade. So when you look at that math, we really shouldn't have a demographic problem because people are reproducing. They're just killing them through abortion. I mean, can you imagine what our country would look like if we had allowed the 50 million babies to be born? Not just morally speaking, but economically, culturally, and otherwise. Let the American baby be born. And so to put a bow on this, the moral of the story is that the Democrat Party just needs to step to the side. They have no credibility. They have no history of true leadership, of moral leadership in this country. And the only way they are even on the life support that they're on is because of this constant brainwashing and victimhood that they foster on the American people and the American voters. And the question that's to be determined is how much longer will the American people fall for this persistent false victimhood? That's the golden question. That's the magical question. How much longer will the American people fall for this persistent victimhood? Another topic I want to make sure we get to today is immigration. We've talked about this in the past with President Trump's immigration agenda, but Vice President Vance has been speaking about the American worker, about getting rid of fraud in our immigration system and in our welfare programs. And Vice President Vance made a very clear point, a very clear message recently that our immigration system, our legal immigration system, should be built on benefiting the American people and the American taxpayer. This is going to be clip one.
Call me crazy, but I think that when we welcome new immigrants to the United States of America, they should be people who enrich our country and bring some good skills into our country, not a person who's going to steal $15 million from the people in this room.
Well, couldn't have said it better. Vice President Vance there, who's been doing a phenomenal job, by the way. Vice President Vance is overseeing several categories, several things, including negotiations with Iran. He has overseen the launching at the DOJ of this welfare fraud task force, this federal fraud task force. And look, he's right. I think we need a moratorium on immigration, legal immigration. We need a 2 to 4 year moratorium. I think that's a minimum. So our system can take a breath, can catch up with the rampant abuse that our immigration system has been through. But furthermore, if we're going to let people into this country, they need to benefit the country. They need to be working. They need to be taxed. They need paying taxes. They don't need to be criminals. They don't need to be on welfare. They need to benefit the American people and the American taxpayer. We'll be back.
Presenting AFA Stream, an online platform that hosts all AFA-produced video content, including documentaries, church curriculum, American Family Radio shows, and our Cultural Institute series.
I would submit that we are a Christian nation, and the proof of that is in our founding documents and in the U.S. Constitution itself, because our founders recognized for the first time in world history that our rights come from God, our Creator, not our government.
AFA Stream is a vital step that we are taking to fulfill our vision to be a leading organization in biblical worldview training for cultural transformation. You'll find top-notch resources that address the issues of our day related to marriage, family, the sanctity of life, and many others. Start streaming today. Stream.afa.net.
At the Core podcast are available at afr.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to the Core here on American Family Radio. Glad to have you back with us on this last segment of today's program. Walker Wildmon here with you. We have the video up here live streaming today's program and past episodes. You can go to stream.afa.net and create a free account. Stream.afa.net to create a free account and watch today's video and past episodes and all American Family Radio shows and content there at stream.afa.net. And of course, if you follow us on all our major social media handles, the live video up is on all the AFR major social media handles and the At the Core Facebook page. Well, towards the beginning of middle of May, became Jerome Powell's last month as Fed chairman, and the Senate recently confirmed Kevin Warsh to be the next Fed chairman to replace Jerome Powell. And so from an economic vantage point, it's going to be interesting to follow what the Federal Reserve does, what Kevin Warsh does, and the rest of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors when it comes to interest rates, because we do have some lingering inflation with the Iran conflict and rise of energy prices. There are some categories where we're seeing inflation peak back up again, above 3%, closer to 4%, and in some specific categories in the double-digit realm when it comes to inflation. The yield is just persistently staying above 4%, the 10-year yield, which is interesting to follow. And so what the Federal Reserve does over the next several months is going to be very interesting, because President Trump has been consistent. He wants rates down. He wants rates down. He said that over and over again. He thinks we need a low-rate environment to produce growth and to relieve some of the pressure on the middle class and the American consumer. And so that's where we are on that front. So we'll track that. We'll continue talking with Chris most weeks, as we do from American Family News, about what's going on economically. Speaking of economically, the stock market has been absolutely hot. It's just been on fire since the last few months, and has fully recovered, and some, when it comes to some of the dips that happened at the early onset of the Iran conflict. The market has fully recovered from some of the lows during the Iran conflict and is now in positive territory, well in positive territory for the year, and is on track for a pretty good year, all things considered, and of course, assuming no other instability comes about. On that front, on the economic front, AI, artificial intelligence, and these technology companies have been responsible for a lot of this market growth, a lot of this stock market growth, specifically within the S&P 500. And they have been on a very historic bull run, setting multiple records, the S&P 500, in the last few years, setting record after record after record. And President Trump, look, he's overseen so many record highs. It's just hard to keep up with, whether it be the Dow, the NASDAQ, or the S&P 500. But on the artificial intelligence front, there's going to be, I predict, there's going to be winners and losers here. When you look at the market cap of these companies, when you look at their share cost, and you look at the debt that they're onboarding to build out artificial intelligence, to build out the data centers, I just don't think there's enough profit margin in the future to make all of these companies flourish and stay solvent in the decade to come. And so that's been, I don't think we're in, this is all my personal opinion, I don't think we're in an AI bubble per se, like you had a dot-com bubble, but I do think there will be losers in the AI boom. I just think there's not enough room for everybody, so to speak, in this AI boom. But once again, it may not be a bubble, but nonetheless, you're going to have winners and losers over the next few years when it comes to artificial intelligence. And I was recently listening to a podcast, tracking the news, getting ready for the show, and there was this analyst named Andy Constan, who was on a podcast, if you will, or a show, talking about how these AI stocks are just swallowing up so much of the S&P 500, so much of the markets, that it's just nearly impossible for all of them to make it on the other side of this AI boom. So let's listen to this about 3-minute clip on his projections when it comes to artificial intelligence and these technology companies.
You know, if we're in a bubble, why aren't we suing crazy PEs? That's a nuanced conversation. We can get into it. But what I think it's driven by is extraordinary, unsustainable E. It's not the P that's the bubble, it's the E. And by the way, all the promises of coming to the present day, all the promises of AI could pay off, and all the earnings estimates through CapEx and then through the actual earnings from the selling of AI services could be delivered to these great companies that are innovating like crazy. And so their earnings and semiconductor earnings all could pay off. The problem is there's not enough pie for the rest of the economy to eat in that circumstance. Currently, there's a GDP growth year over year that's expected to be about $200 billion of new GDP. Sorry, about $1.5 billion new GDP that's
$1.5 trillion, right?
Sorry, $1.5 trillion.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry. $1.5 trillion of GDP that's going to be created. Usually corporations eat about 10 to 12% of that. So that's what, 200 billion, 175 billion. Just the AI stocks, the public AI stocks, are expected to earn $250 billion more next year. And so where's that money coming from? It's all, and the S&P in its entirety is expected to earn 400 billion. Where's the GDP that can do that? Now, it could come from everywhere else. It could come from small businesses, private businesses, other stocks that are not, that are, you know, the S&P is still pretty high earnings expectations, but some pain being felt by companies that are just not getting their share of pie. And I think the expectations that can allow every stock to eat at its current expectations for growth, there's just no conditions where there will be enough pie for everyone. And so to me, that represents unsustainable expectations. However, there could be winners. It could be the case that 62.5% of all earnings made by the S&P 500 accrue to AI companies. Could be. That's what consensus estimates are. 62.5% of all change in earnings year over year accrue to AI stocks right now. That could happen, but if it doesn't, if it's less than that, AI stocks are going to come down. If it's more than that, the rest of the S&P is going to come down. And already it's more than double what's even available to corporations unless GDP explodes higher.
So the essence of that, and I know those of you who don't track the markets and the economy more deeply, some of that, the jargon there is not understood. But what this gentleman, once again, his name is Andy Constan. What he's saying on this show, on this podcast, is that this boom in the stock market, specifically for the sake of this discussion, the S&P 500, this boom, this bull market on the S&P 500, driven by largely artificial intelligence and the build out of that in these data centers, is viable, but there's going to be losers here. There's going to be companies that leaned heavily into this that just don't make it. He said, you kept using the pie analogy. He said, look, there's not enough pie to go around for everybody to be a winner when it comes to these AI and technology companies. And so that's probably the gamble that's taking place here. Once again, a lot of these companies are leaning heavily into debt and financing to build out artificial intelligence. Now, I do think from a productivity standpoint and an implementation standpoint, specifically in manufacturing and some of these other categories, I do think artificial intelligence is going to make a big difference. I think it's going to make companies more efficient in the long run, but can they create revenue and earnings to keep up with this massive investment that they're pouring in? That's going to be the question. And once again, some will and some won't. And so you'll have winners and losers. It's basically a race to the top at this point when it comes to artificial intelligence. But America has to be regardless of what your viewpoint is on AI. I know I have myself some reservations about artificial intelligence. I think there needs to be moral and ethical boundaries around artificial intelligence. And I think primarily it's going to have to take place either in Congress or state legislatures to create those boundaries. But nonetheless, America has to be the leader on this front. President Trump has said this on multiple occasions. We cannot allow communist China or another country, and pretty much the only two countries racing for this are the U.S. and China. But America has to be the place that is the leader on artificial intelligence, because that allows us to be the referee. That allows us to set the standard on what's acceptable use of AI and what is not acceptable use of artificial intelligence. But the other element here that is going to be a game changer is these robotics and artificial intelligence. I was watching a video. There was a live video. It was 8 hours long. I obviously didn't watch the whole thing, but it was this robot that was sorting packages at a fulfillment center, if you will. It was almost like an Amazon type fulfillment center, and this robot was sorting packages and like flipping them over and making sure the label could be read by the scanner. And when I watched, I mean, this robot was probably halfway into an 8-hour shift, and this humanoid robot was at like 8,000 packages. It was just insane. And so, Bobby, when you look at that and an 8-hour shift of otherwise, if it's not a robot, it's a human, and all they're doing is like sorting with their hand packages, laying them flat so the scanners can read the address and everything and sort them. Those are the type jobs where most humans would look at and go, yeah, I'm completely fine with a robot doing that.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe the humans on the computer controlling the robot are controlling 10 of them. But there are some jobs in automation and manufacturing and fulfillment where that makes sense.
Yeah. And in the auto industry, they've been using robots for decades now.
That's true. And, for assembly, for painting.
Yeah. And you look at the clout that the UAW, the United Auto Workers, still has in that industry. So it's not like there are no human auto manufacturers, auto builders, auto assemblers, and such. So it hasn't really decimated that industry, and you would have to use that as the example going forward, and hoping that. That would be the example, if you will, in maintaining a human workforce in other industries as well.
Yeah, and I think with a lot of this, Bobby, there has to be obviously human oversight,
right?
Human oversight and a human touch to it. For example, because if you lose that, there is the moral angle, which I haven't really. Honestly put enough time into this to really start taking positions, Bobby. But there has to be, in my opinion, since God created, and I'm oversimplifying this probably, but since God created man to work, work needs to be part of daily life. And Bobby, my concern when you heavily lean into AI and robotics and humanoids is if you do take away some of the work of man, at some point, Bobby, that's going to backfire.
Yeah, it has to. There has to be a loser. The title of this segment is going to be, losers in the AI boom.
Yeah.
We're not talking about just industries. We're talking about what is the human factor in all that.
Yeah.
It's one thing to say the AI folks and the creators of that technology and the huge CapEx expenditures in that industry and those who put out those dollars and what they will reap from that is one thing, but the human factor and human aspects of the various industries and workplaces and all that goes along with that, what is that truly going to look like?
Yeah.
Is it going to be like a McDonald's where you walk in with kiosks and you have humanoid cooks and chefs back there and somebody taking your order who is not of the human species, and where does it end? It might be a little oversimplification there, but that's already started. So
Bobby, and I'm going to predict out 10 to 20 years. I think some of this is going to backfire.
Oh, there's no question.
I think some of AI adoption will be wonderful. People will love it, and everybody will think this is a great idea. But I think, to your point, being able to talk to a human, being able to interact, being able to laugh, being able to share emotions, these are human experiences that God created us with. And I think the human will, at some point, rebel against this push into technology and robotics. But time will tell. We'll see.
The French Revolution all over again.
There you go. All right, folks. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining.